So I'm extremely disappointed. I am outraged. I lost sleep that Indiana couldn't jump Tennessee.
You lied to us.
Yeah.
I tried to tell you.
27 voting points separate Tennessee from Indiana at 7 and 8. By the way, the CBS Sports 134, obviously a far more trustworthy product, has Indiana at 5 with its update. So that's where 9-0 teams belong.
I heard they got a first place vote.
They got a couple of 2s. I don't get to tabulate all the ballots, but I know that they got a couple 2s on there. I didn't have them at number 1, but
my ratings did.
Indiana?
Yeah.
I mean, it is wild how they have continued to in whatever you want to use. Indiana is belonging at this point when you look at everything. Other movement, we've got Oregon now as the unanimous first place team in the AP Top 25 poll. We got big moves up, 5 spots for Indiana, 7 spots for SMU. We got drops down, 5 spots down for Texas A&M after the loss to South Carolina. Iowa State drops 6 spots after taking its first defeat of the season. Clemson down 8 spots after its loss to Louisville. Kansas State and Pitt also fall. Vandy back in the top 25, and Louisville into the top 25. South Carolina falling just short. Missouri checking in at 26th. Any thoughts on the rest of the AP top 25?
I have several.
Okay.
First of all, excellent job getting Missouri out the paint. We asked for this on Saturday night. It was like, look, there's a lot of moves you need to make, but almost all of them will be just completely nonsensical if you just leave that logic conundrum in of Missouri being ranked. And this poll doesn't bother me all that much because you got rid of the Missouri problem. After that, everything else sort of makes sense. I mean, you could probably say Indiana should also be above Penn State if you want to look at like quality of wins and who they've beaten, what the scores have been. But I mean, getting Missouri out is huge because it allows you to put Vandy in, allows you to put Louisville in, right? You probably don't need to drop Pitt all the way out of the poll if they were undefeated prior to that game. I do think you could probably argue South Carolina at this point if you're like a pollster who looks at quality of play. Like were they lucky to take Bama to the wire? Sure, but like they also took LSU to the wire. They did beat Texas A&M. What's their other loss? They have 3.
Well, they thought. Oh yeah,
Alabama, A&M, and or no, not A&M. They just beat A&M. Is it Tennessee?
No,
Ole Miss. They lost to, right?
I don't think they played Tennessee yet, have they?
Their 3 losses are LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama.
Right. Okay. So the Ole Miss one, right? I mean, like they also obviously did not really play well, but the quarterback was hurt. So if you want to tell me that South Carolina should be ranked, I can kind of get with that. I think just based on quality of play, they may not have like the depth of wins, I guess, but it's not bad.
I mean, they're the quality loss team, which I normally hate, but it's quality of performance in those defeats. We're all the way into November. I think they, to me, sure feel like a top 30 team, whether you want to put them at 24, 25, 26, 27, that's kind of splitting hairs for me, but they are among the most worthy 3-loss teams when we're stacking up the top 50 teams in the country.
With Sellers, they're clearly like at least one of the best top 25 teams in the country. Like when he's healthy, he looked like he had a different gear on Saturday night than he had the prior couple games.
Off week did Sellers well to be able to get right.
Yeah.
I think so.
Indiana's a top 3 team. And if you wanted to put them at 1, I'd do it. But I do think Oregon's win over Ohio State is a better win than everything they've done. But Indiana has completely owned their schedule. If they just had a different brand name or wore different colors, they probably would be 1 or 2. That was something I will harp on all season long as they keep blowing out opponents. Like that's all they do. And by the way, they are a 2-touchdown favorite against Michigan. And we just saw Oregon and I know it was home and road and it's different, but it's only a 3-point difference than what Oregon was if you take in the home field versus road game for them. The other one, SMU, to me, should be a top 10 team. You start looking at their wins and consider their loss was only by 3 points with another quarterback who was a different quarterback. And the Louisville win looks better all of a sudden with what they did to Clemson. And the game against Pitt, top 25 opponent, where they completely dominated. I know Pitt had a couple scores late to make that one respectable. The Duke game, they won with 6 turnovers. Like that to me is one of those, those wins that you kind of everybody has, but yet it holds back SMU more than most. I think SMU should be a top 10 team.
I think that's fair.
To go back to what Danny was just saying about Indiana, Penn State, let's take last week out. Let's take Penn State's loss to Ohio State out. We won't consider Indiana's 37-point rout of Michigan State. Indiana is, 8-0. They haven't lost a game or they haven't won a game by fewer than 14 points. You can argue that their schedule, because it's FIU, Western Illinois, at UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington. Penn State, West Virginia, Bowling Green, Kent State, the only winless team left in the country. Illinois, UCLA, at USC, at Wisconsin. That's a 3-point win. Other than that, that's their closest. All their others have been by at least 14 points. So incredibly similar resumes. But Penn State was where last week? Number 3. Where was Indiana? Number 11 or 12? Like, you can argue that they're the same exact team, but because it's Indiana and not Penn State, they do not get nearly the same kind of respect from voters in the polls just because they're not supposed to be there. So Indiana's won on my ballot this week, but again, my ballot is based on ratings. It's not my opinion. It's just that compared to every other team in the country, they have played the best football than anybody else statistically. And in my SOS metric, their strength of schedule really isn't that much worse than a lot of other teams in the top 10 right now. I wouldn't put them there in my opinion, but I'm just saying, as far as the respect that they get in the polls, it's pretty obvious what their biggest problem is. And you could say the same thing about BYU. Their biggest problem is who they are, not how they've played.
I do have a little pushback on the Indiana stuff, and I think you're making good points here. West Virginia is a better win for Penn State than any win Indiana has so far, right? Like going on the road and winning in Morgantown.
I don't know if West Virginia and Michigan State are all that dissimilar.
I mean, West Virginia is what? They're 4-4.
They're going to go 6-6. I would
4-4 versus 4-5 because Michigan State was 4-4 heading into the weekend.
And I have a feeling Indiana would absolutely crush West Virginia.
Yeah, and Penn
State they can score points.
Yeah.
Penn State's offense has been kind of dookie all season long.
I think the problem is like Indiana, they're clearly good because they're blowing people out, and like that's a mark of a good team. It feels a little Ole Missy in a certain way, like Ole Miss likes to run it up on some of the bad teams, and that's not entirely what Indiana's doing every game. But I mean, there is really a chance here that they have played a schedule where 0 teams make a bowl. Like I know the chat saying their strength of schedule is 103. I guess there's a little concern there still, but like they've clearly shown they're a really, really damn good football team by the level you blow those teams out. Like eventually you kind of got to respect that.
Yeah. Last one, just to make sure I'm consistent in my philosophies. Should Clemson be in the top 25 based on their resume?
NC State's the only win against a team with a better than 500 record. They got a couple 4-4s in there, but
their losses have been ugly. Like they haven't looked like a top 25 team. Like you get blown out by Clemson again, a score that's probably a little deceiving that they did score some late touchdowns, but they were never competitive in. I don't know if Clemson's a top 25 team.
Use the Indiana logic on Clemson, right? Like Indiana has smoked a bunch of bad teams. Clemson has also smoked a bunch of bad teams. Indiana has not played a team that is like a top 25 or even probably top 30 power rating type team so far. Clemson's played 2 probably 2. And, Louisville beat them. Obviously, like they got beat down really bad by Georgia. Like if Indiana gets smoked by Ohio State, the likes of which, Clemson got smoked by Georgia, which is possible, but maybe not probable. Like, what are we going to be saying there? Clemson is basically doing exactly what Indiana is doing, except it has played 2 like really good teams and has lost both, whereas Indiana has played 0. But they're both blowing out everybody who's not very good.
If we look at strength of record instead of strength of schedule, which is a metric that actually measures how you play against that strength of schedule, Indiana is 7th. Clemson is 29th.
Strength of record just measures win or loss, right? Or
yeah, like what would the average top 25 team's chance of having your record against the teams you've played? Indiana is 7th. Clemson is 29th.
You see the point, though? Like, I mean,
yeah. And to your point,
blowing out bad teams. Clemson just happened to have played somebody.
And to your point, Bud, I think if assuming they beat Michigan, which is still up and down, I mean, that's like they got to prove it. But I think then it does matter. How do you look on the road at Ohio State? Like if they get beat 34-3, they're probably not making the playoffs, even though it's probably not fair. But if they lose by a field goal or a touchdown and it's competitive through 3 or 4 quarters, then I think they do. With their they should. If they're 11-1 and that's their only loss is on the road against Ohio State by a touchdown or less, then they should make the playoffs. But I do think a lot of it hinges on how they look in that game.
Bud does not respect the wagon.
He does not.
Ryan in the tailgate called Clemson the ACC Missouri, which is
Good call.
Which is not
Good call.
I think Clemson would smoke Missouri.
Well, no. I think it's more of a relative profile type thing in terms of like the way you've looked against the very best teams on your schedule and the way that you can look against the worst teams on your schedule. Like there's certainly that sort of disparate nature in terms of where they sit among some of those other teams.